I trusted him more than anyone. Until he said, "Pay me $500 or I'll show everyone what you wrote about Mom." It was my diary. He had read every single word. So here I am, 23 years old, sitting in my childhood bedroom at 2 a.m., wondering how my life became such a mess. 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was deciding whether to move out of my parents' house or save more money. Now I'm dealing with family betrayal that's making me question everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. Let me back up. I've been keeping a diary since I was 16. Not the cute little pink book with the tiny lock that you see in movies. This is a serious leather-bound journal that I filled with 7 years of my deepest thoughts, fears, and honestly, some pretty harsh observations about my family. I kept it hidden in a shoebox under my bed, wrapped in an old sweater, because even though I'm an adult, old habits die hard when you're still living at home. My younger brother is 21, still in college, and has always been what my mom calls the charming one. He's got this easy smile and this way of making people feel like they're the most important person in the room. Growing up, he could get away with murder just by flashing those dimples. I always thought we were close. We'd stay up late watching movies, complaining about our parents' weird rules, sharing inside jokes that nobody else got. He was supposed to be my person, you know? 3 weeks ago, I came home from work to find him sitting on my bed, holding my diary open like it was a magazine. The blood just drained from my face. I felt like I was going to throw up. All those years of private thoughts, all those moments when I was angry or hurt or confused and needed somewhere safe to put those feelings, he was just casually flipping through them like they meant nothing. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he didn't even look embarrassed. He just smiled that same charming smile and said he'd been looking for a phone charger and accidentally found it. But the way he was reading, taking his time with each page, told me this wasn't accidental at all. He'd been reading for a while. The worst part was seeing which pages he'd bookmarked with little sticky notes. All the entries where I'd written about feeling like our mom played favorites, about how I sometimes felt invisible next to his achievements, about my struggles with feeling good enough. But also the really personal stuff, like how I'd had a pregnancy scare last year that I never told anyone about, or how I sometimes wondered if our dad's drinking was worse than we all pretended it was. He told me not to worry about it, that he understood I needed to vent somewhere. But something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Like he was filing away information for later use. I should have demanded he give it back right then. I should have told our parents. Instead, I just asked him to please respect my privacy and never touch it again. He promised he wouldn't, gave me a hug, and I actually believed him. God, I was so stupid. The first demand came a week later. He needed $500 for some emergency, wouldn't say what for, just that he needed it by Friday, or there would be consequences. When I said I didn't have that kind of money lying around, he mentioned how interesting my diary entries about Mom were, especially the one where I called her emotionally manipulative and said I sometimes wished I'd been born into a different family. My stomach dropped. He had memorized specific entries. He'd been studying my diary like it was homework. I ended up emptying my savings account. $500 that I'd been putting aside for months gone. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that he just needed help and chose a really messed up way to ask for it. I convinced myself that deep down he was still the brother who used to sneak me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, he needed another $200 for textbooks. When I hesitated, he started reciting the entry I'd written about feeling like a failure for still living at home at 23, about how I sometimes cried in my car after family dinners because I felt like such a disappointment. He said it would be such a shame if Mom and Dad knew how I really felt about the family dinners they worked so hard to make special. The manipulation was so calculated, so cruel. He knew exactly which entries would hurt the most if they got out. He'd weaponized my own thoughts against me. I gave him the $200. Then it was $100 here, $50 there. Always with the same threat hanging over my head. Always with him reminding me of specific things I'd written, specific vulnerabilities I'd shared with what I thought was a safe space. The breaking point came when he demanded I cover his part of the rent for the apartment he shares with 3 other guys. $350. When I said I literally couldn't afford it, he threatened to show our parents the entries about how I sometimes smoked weed to deal with anxiety, and how I'd been seeing someone they wouldn't approve of. That's when I realized this wasn't going to end. He wasn't going to suddenly develop a conscience and stop. He'd found a way to make me his personal ATM, and he was going to milk it for everything it was worth. I spent that whole night crying and trying to figure out what to do. I felt so alone. The person I used to turn to when I needed advice was the same person who was destroying my life. Every time I looked at him across the dinner table, smiling and joking with our parents, I felt sick. How could someone who claimed to love me do this? The worst part was watching him be so normal with everyone else. He'd still text me funny memes, still ask if I wanted to watch a movie together, still act like the caring little brother he'd always been. It was like he compartmentalized the blackmail into this separate box that didn't affect the rest of our relationship. But for me, it poisoned everything. I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night wondering what he was going to demand next, what entry he was going to use against me. I stopped writing in my diary altogether because I couldn't stand the thought of giving him more ammunition. But that just made me feel even more isolated because I'd lost the one outlet I relied on for years. My relationship with my parents started suffering too. Every family dinner felt like a performance where I had to pretend everything was fine while my brother sat there knowing he could destroy my relationships with them whenever he wanted. I became distant and short-tempered, which only made me feel more guilty because they didn't understand why I was pulling away. I considered moving out, but he drained my savings. I considered telling my parents, but I was terrified of how they'd react to some of the things I'd written. I felt completely trapped. That's where things stood when I made my first post. Update 1. The response to my post was overwhelming. I honestly wasn't expecting so many people to care about my situation, and reading all your comments made me realize how messed up this whole thing really was. A lot of you pointed out that what he was doing wasn't just being a jerk, it was actual blackmail, which is illegal. That hadn't really sunk in for me until I saw it written out by strangers. The advice ranged from confronting him directly to involving law enforcement, but the comment that really stuck with me was from someone who said I needed to take back control of the narrative before he escalated further. They were right, I was just reacting to his demands instead of actually dealing with the problem. So I decided to get creative. First, I bought a small digital recorder, one of those tiny ones that you can hide easily. I figured if I was going to confront him, I needed evidence of what he was doing. I spent 2 days psyching myself up for it. The opportunity came when he texted me asking for another $100 for gas money with his usual threat about sharing my interesting thoughts about family loyalty with everyone. Instead of just giving in like I had been, I asked him to come to my room so we could talk about it. When he showed up, acting all casual and brotherly, I had the recorder running in my pocket. I asked him straight out why he was doing this to me. At first, he tried to play innocent, but when I pressed him, he actually admitted everything. He said he'd been curious about what I really thought about the family, and once he started reading, he couldn't stop. He said the money wasn't even the main point, he liked having power over me. That confession was like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about him needing help or being desperate. He was enjoying it. He was enjoying making me squirm, enjoying knowing he could manipulate me whenever he wanted. My own brother was getting off on making my life miserable. But here's where it gets interesting. I asked him what he thought would happen if I just told our parents everything myself. His whole confident attitude shifted. He started backtracking, saying he was just joking around, that he'd never actually show anyone the diary. But I could see panic in his eyes for the first time. That's when I realized his power only worked if I cared more about hiding my secrets than he cared about the consequences of his actions. But what if I removed that imbalance? I told him I was done paying and that I was going to tell our parents about the blackmail. He immediately started threatening to share the diary entries, but I just shrugged and said, "Go ahead." I told him that yeah, I'd written some harsh things when I was angry or hurt, but that's what diaries are for. Our parents are adults, they'd understand that everyone needs a place to vent. The look on his face was priceless. He'd been so sure that the fear of embarrassment would keep me under his control forever. He'd never considered that I might just not care anymore. He tried a few more threats, but I held firm. I told him that if he shared even one entry from my diary, I'd show our parents the recording of him admitting to blackmail, and I'd also report him to the police. I pointed out that what he was doing was actually a crime and that he was old enough to face real consequences for it. By the end of the conversation, he was practically begging me not to tell our parents. He promised he'd never bring up the diary again, that he'd delete any photos he'd taken of the pages, that he'd pretend none of this ever happened. But I wasn't interested in just sweeping it under the rug anymore. I gave him 24 hours to come clean to our parents himself, or I'd do it for him. I told him he could frame it however he wanted, as a stupid mistake, a moment of bad judgment, whatever, but that they needed to know what happened. And that he needed to pay me back every penny he'd stolen from me. He spent the next day trying to convince me to change my mind. He apologized, he cried, he promised he'd never do anything like this again. But it was too late. I'd seen who he really was when he thought he held all the cards, and I couldn't unsee it. The conversation with our parents was brutal. He ended up telling them a watered-down version where he accidentally found the diary and jokingly asked for money without realizing how serious it was. But I had the recording and I made sure they heard the part where he admitted to enjoying having power over me. Our mom cried. Our dad was so angry I thought he might actually hit something. They were horrified that one of their children had been tormenting the other for weeks while they had no idea anything was wrong. The immediate aftermath was chaos. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of tears, a lot of conversations about family, trust, and respect. My brother was grounded like a teenager. No car, no money, no going out with friends. Our parents made him get a part-time job to pay me back, and they insisted on family meetings to work through what had happened. But honestly, the family meetings felt forced and awkward. Everyone was trying to get back to normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. The damage was done. The weird part was that in some ways I felt better. The constant anxiety was gone. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, waiting for the next demand. I'd taken back control of my life, and that felt incredible. But I also felt this deep sadness that I hadn't expected. The brother I'd grown up with, the one I trusted with everything, was gone. In his place was this person who'd calculated exactly how to hurt me and then enjoyed doing it. I was grieving the relationship I thought we had. Update 2. It's been 6 weeks since everything came out, and I wanted to give you all a final update because your support meant so much to me during the worst part of this. The family dynamics have settled into a weird new normal. My brother did pay me back. It took him a month working at a grocery store, but he managed it. Our parents supervised the whole thing to make sure he actually followed through. He also wrote me a letter apologizing, which felt forced but was probably mandated by our parents. The strange thing is how much our relationship has changed. We're polite to each other now, but that easy closeness we used to have is completely gone. We don't joke around anymore, don't watch movies together, don't text random funny things throughout the day. It's like we're acquaintances who happen to live in the same house. Part of me misses the brother I thought I had. But I've realized that person might not have been real to begin with. The brother who could systematically manipulate and torment me for weeks while acting completely normal wasn't someone who just made a mistake. That takes a level of coldness that doesn't develop overnight. Our parents have been trying so hard to fix things. They've suggested family activities, encouraged us to talk through our feelings, even hinted at getting outside help to repair our relationship. But I think they're finally starting to understand that some things can't be fixed just because you want them to be. The biggest change has been in how I see myself. For weeks, I felt like a victim, powerless, trapped, ashamed. But standing up to him and taking control of the situation showed me that I'm stronger than I thought. I'm not the same person who used to cry in her car after family dinners because she felt like a disappointment. I moved out 3 weeks ago. I found a tiny studio apartment that eats up most of my income, but it's mine. I can write in my diary without worrying about who might read it. I can have bad days without someone using them against me later. I can just exist without calculating how every emotion or thought might be weaponized. My brother seemed almost relieved when I announced I was leaving. I think the constant tension was getting to him too. Our parents were sad but supportive. I think they understood that staying wasn't healthy for any of us. The most unexpected thing has been how much I've grown to value my privacy and my independence. Living alone for the first time in my life has been challenging but also incredibly freeing. I'm learning who I am when I'm not constantly worried about how my family perceives me. I started the diary again, but this time I keep it in a small safe. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that some things are sacred and need to be protected. My thoughts, my feelings, my private moments of vulnerability, those belong to me and I have the right to keep them safe. As for my relationship with my brother, I don't know if it will ever recover. Maybe someday we'll be able to rebuild some kind of trust, but it will never be the same. I can't unsee the person he became when he thought he held power over me. I can't forget how he enjoyed my distress. But that's okay. I've learned that not all relationships are meant to survive, even family ones. Sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to believe them. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting that someone you loved isn't who you thought they were. The most important thing I've learned is that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. I spent weeks paying money I couldn't afford and living in constant fear just to protect family harmony. But that harmony was built on my suffering, and it wasn't worth preserving. To anyone else dealing with family members who think they can manipulate or control you, you have more power than you think. The people who hurt us often count on our love for them to keep us silent. But love shouldn't come at the cost of your peace of mind or your self-respect. I'm doing okay now. Better than okay, actually. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, to value my own thoughts and feelings, to take up space without apologizing for it. I'm rebuilding relationships with friends I'd neglected during the worst of it. I'm even considering dating again, which felt impossible when I was so consumed by family drama. My brother and I will probably never be close again, and that breaks my heart. But I'd rather have a broken heart than a broken spirit. I'd rather miss the relationship I thought we had than continue being destroyed by the one we actually had. Thanks to everyone who took the time to comment and share their own stories. It helped me realize I wasn't alone and that what was happening to me wasn't normal or acceptable. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to tell you that you deserve better before you can believe it yourself.